Greetings, Marissa, for the third time. This is a footnote to the main teaching. I didn't want to include it in that one, but it does address a fairly common point that's brought up concerning the idea of the baptism of the Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in tongues as a second experience. And so I just wanted to cover that really briefly. This will not be a long, involved teaching, although it certainly could be. But what I want to refer to is that people will often bring up three different stories or three different events in the book of Acts. Acts 2, Acts 8, and Acts 19, because they all have to do with the activity of the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues. And they'll use these stories as proof or as proof texts for a second step for receiving the Holy Spirit. But I would speak caution here. For example, in the legal system, there is a saying, a maxim, a proverb, if you will, that says hard cases make for bad law. What does that mean? It means that there are going to be cases that are hard. What do we mean by that? Cases that are unique. They're specialized. There's something that sets them apart, that you cannot use them to make basic principles of law from. They are exceptions. They are exceptional cases, and they should be in their own legal category. This is precisely the case for Acts chapter 2, Acts chapter 8, and Acts chapter 19. These are quote-unquote hard events, hard cases. They are unique. They are exceptional. They are events that are part of the transition to the new covenant. So they are in that period of going from one to the other, and beyond that is the normative. So this is the transition phase or time of change, and so these are one-time experiences. They're not going to happen again, so you can't make governing principles out of them in terms of our relationship to the Holy Spirit or speaking in tongues. So these do, also have to do, Acts 2, 8, and 19 have to do with spreading the gospel as Jesus commanded them to Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth. And furthermore, they have something special to do with a unique ministry that Jesus gave to Peter in a conversation he had with him about the keys of the kingdom. But that's a whole other teaching. It's more involved, so we won't get caught up in that here. And so I'll keep it brief, simple, and to the point. Let me give you one example of why one doesn't want to make any of these three stories in Acts 2, 8, or 19 to be normative for the church today. Let's take Acts chapter 2 as our example, although we could use the other ones as well. This is the first instance of people, quote-unquote, receiving the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues. I mean, they really do. I'm not trying to make light of that, but is it normative for the church today? Well, let's examine that just really briefly. Let's ask the question, what were some of the characteristics of that event? And what happened when these believers received the Holy Spirit and spoke in tongues? Well, there was a noise and a violent rushing wind. There were tongues as a fire that distributed to each of the people who were there. They were all filled with the Holy Spirit and spoke in tongues. And the tongues that they spoke in were all understood by the various people with various languages who were there as part of the audience. So they understood, each one of them in their own language, what was being spoken. Truly a miracle. But do you really want to make the case that this should be the criteria for genuinely receiving the Holy Spirit in the church today? And then further making that a confirmation or a sign or an evidence of being baptized in the Holy Spirit? Well, if that's the case you want to make, then that would mean that unless all of those factors, the wind and the distribution of the tongues of fire and everybody present speaking in tongues and all the audience there understanding in their own language what the various people were speaking, that unless all of those factors were present when you spoke in tongues, when you were baptized in the Holy Spirit, if all those factors aren't present, your experience is false. It's not genuine or authentic. It doesn't meet the criteria. It must be from another spirit other than the Holy Spirit. Do you really want to go there? I think not. So we must be careful to discern the scriptures, put them into a basic principled framework, and then from that principled framework, which I gave to you in the first video, then we can turn to evaluate some of those special and unique cases which we just did here. So that, I think, is the proper course of study. So I hope this one helps you as well. And again, feel free to follow up with any questions that you or any of your friends may have, and I will be happy to follow up also. So signing off for now. Love and prayers, Mr. Soche.